Hello, everybody. How's it going? Happy Halloween. I've got my Charmander outfit on. I hope you have yours on too, your Halloween gear. So hey, here we are. This is the October Community AMA. We received a lot of really great questions from all of you. I'm going to be going through them today. We picked 10. These are all fully sourced from community, and I will be, digging into them. Okay. Before I do that, I've got an initial announcement. So the core team has been working really closely with all the developers in the SKALE ecosystem. And the SKALE ecosystem is just growing tremendously in terms of real contributors, people that are building on SKALE, running validator nodes, submitting code, building tooling, building different products. And so our goal is to help all these developers come together and create this SKALE developer ecosystem. A big piece of that is the roadmap. Now, anybody today can go into GitHub and see the roadmap, okay? Fully open, any line of code, any bug, any issue, it's all publicly there. This is an open community-run project. Now, what's missing, I would say, is a long-term vision roadmap, and one that is readable for anybody. You don't need to have a GitHub account. You don't need to be able to understand nuances of code. We need a roadmap at that level that I think will tie in the entire community together. So the core team, it's not the core team's job to go and do that. The core team's job is to help facilitate all that coming together due to the decentralized nature of the project. So in November, there will be a very exciting release coming of this roadmap that has a few cool things that have been requested by developers that I'm super pumped about. You might start catching wind of some of these things. There's still, I'd say, more consensus needed across the community of the details of what these features are and how they look like. But we have some awesome people from a lot of projects that have great ideas that are funneling into the project. Okay, so you're going to see SKALE keep growing and doing more and innovating. And I'm excited to have the position I do where I can help communicate that back to the community. So, all right, well, without further ado, let's get started. First question is from It's Witjack, and thank you for submitting this. Where do we stand on the release of Metaport? So Metaport is baked. It is done. It's been done for a while. Now, again, this is, there's code, but then there's also chains and people and teams that run those chains. Now, the first iteration of this live code that's finished to be pushed out is coming really soon. I don't have the exact date, but one thing I will ask is there are some awesome live working demos there that people can go mess around with. And I'm going to have I'm going to ask the team to be publishing maybe some videos and content so people can see this. And it's not long until you can go from crypto blades over to Ruby, swap and buy more skill tokens, then go over and play more without ever needing to pay the heavy fees of going back to Binance or other chains or the Ethereum mainnet, other places. So we're pumped about that. Also pumped about other chains integrating this. And the cool thing about this, the widget, the Metaport widget, is an open piece of software. Any developer can go plug it into their website, their application. What it does is it helps their users, if they're using MetaMask or Ledger or any type of wallet that's supported in SKALE, that's EVM friendly, they can plug into the Metaport without being technical and move their assets quickly over to Ruby or go from Ruby to an NFT marketplace. And there's some exciting stuff. Calypso is rolling out. You're going to see the NFT marketplaces start going live. I think there'll be a soft launch here at the beginning of November, and then a big launch in mid-November for lots of really awesome NFT projects. And we're excited about the artists that are supporting, the creators, the games that are launching NFTs. There's a lot happening with NFTs on SKALE. This is all open information, by the way. Please check out the blog to see a lot of the stuff that's coming. And every day there's more and more stuff coming through the pipe that we're excited to tell you about. Okay, so thank you for that question. Great question. And as a follow-up, there'll be an exact date and live footage of this operating and working that will be published really soon, hopefully in the next day or two. All right, next question, which I think is very related from Majk. Okay, MAJK. Is it possible, for example, to have the Brawl token go straight to CryptoBlade's chain by using Metaport? And I think this is a question again about how Metaport functions. So tokens can move seamlessly within the SKALE ecosystem. Now, one thing that really matters is the token mapping. Where does it start? And so if you're coming right now from CryptoBlades, you're coming in through their specific bridge. It's not the SKALE IMA bridge, but you can come there and then hop from there over to Ruby. Now, that would be the skill token. I think there's a question about Brawl. Brawl tokens are all, when they map in, they're going to map in through Ruby, through Europa, and then hop over to Brawl. And that way, they have to have standardized mapping. If you don't have your own bridge, then you map through Europa. If you have your own bridge, then you can hop to your chain and then go over to Europa to swap tokens, to play more, be able to purchase NFTs, etc. All right. Question from Edward Masta. What makes SKALE claim that is the blockchain network of the future? And do you find other blockchains not so futuristic? I think this is a great question. So most blockchains, and I think what you're getting at here is, what is a modular chain? What's a monolithic chain? Where's the market going? Now, there's a couple different ways to scale a blockchain. One is to try to make the biggest, fastest layer one possible. These are called monolithic layer ones. You see a lot of these efforts, the Ethereum killers that are trying to build the fastest, biggest product, but it's a single database, and single databases have finite capacity. And so in a blockchain ecosystem, if more nodes join that network, more computers join, it actually doesn't make it faster, it just grows the security, okay? And at some point then, when you start hitting capacity, either the prices have to go up or people need to be comfortable with worse performance, all right? The other model is taking a layer one chain and then having vertical scaling, adding roll-up features on top of it. These are off-chain, they're not blockchain solutions, they're off-chain solutions that run blockchain software in a centralized environment, and they use fraud proofs. So it's almost like enterprise software with a few bells and whistles that ensure security is in place and that finality happens on the mainnet to try and preserve decentralization. Now, one technique that SKALE's been really observing and just waiting for it to grow is our ZK techniques. Please keep your eye open for things coming with SKALE and ZK. Again, a lot of developer action, pushing the ball forward on that front. I'm excited to see what the community developers, how they feel about adding ZK, but I think there's some very special things SKALE could use to add ZK into this recipe and world of scalability. Okay, there's a third model that SKALE leverages for scaling, and that's why we say it's a blockchain network of the future, because it's a modular multi-chain. These are effectively shards. There's a big pool of chains that are adding security, and within this big pool, you have these smaller groups that are bundled together. These small groups have speed and agility, and it's almost like in traffic, they have their own lane, they can go 100 miles an hour. But they all share the security. It's almost like they have the same police force. Each lane doesn't need to hire their own police officers. There's one police they just use the highway patrol, and their tax dollars pay for all the security across all these lanes, but they individually get to have their own lane to drive fast in. And if all these lanes get full, they actually can keep adding lanes, and the security just keeps growing across the entire network. And that's how SKALE works. We call that a modular multi-chain network. Now, when I say it's a network of the future, you see a lot of the competitors of SKALE trying to build multi-chain networks. And SKALE already has a multi-chain network. And so we actually literally have it live. It's decentralized. It's popping today. There's huge amount of transactions. I mean, I need to give actually a live update on that. There, as of today, 13,951,000 transactions across SKALE since effectively June. Okay. The SKALE V2 launch that happened in May, late April through end of May, as everything was transitioned and moved over. That's when we finally hit our growth curve as a community. And thus far, we had 4.1 million transactions in September, already 5.6 million today in October. So 2.6 million back in August, only 1.1 million in July. And so the numbers keep going up. And that's because, you know, there are projects, games, Web3 products, et cetera, that are taking advantage of the fact that SKALE has zero gas fees. Okay. We'll talk about zero gas fees in a second. There's a good question somebody had. Now, the blockchain network of the future, we say it's of the future because other people are recognizing that you can't have finite capacity and have unlimited scaling. You need to have a way to scale linearly while sharing security. You can always keep adding more chains, but if those chains don't have interoperability, a connected environment between them, and if they don't share security, you're really breaking the model. You know, you could have an unlimited amount of blockchains, but it doesn't really matter unless they have pooled properties between them. That's what we think of as the future. All right. Great question. All right. So please explain the business model for a project running on SKALE. I think this is from Simaj, came in on 10/29. Thank you for this question. So one, there are a lot of business models people have that run on SKALE. They're Web3 projects that monetize through transaction fees or through tokenization or through NFT business marketplace value capture. There are also going to be centralized companies that are big traditional companies that launch products on SKALE and have their own unique business models. There'll be, teams and sports leagues and organizations that have a need for NFT gating, for example. So the business models that our partners have are all very dispersed. Now, there's a question about zero gas fees that I'm going to get into in a second, because you may be getting at what is the business model of SKALE, and I think that's really important for everyone to know, but we're going to get to that in a minute. Okay, thank you, though, Simaj, for that question. Tom, great question here. Okay, so many great partnerships and dApps have been announced over the last few months. And quick note, if you want to know what those are, please go to the SKALE blog. Every time we have the open ability to announce the partnerships that are signed, they get released there. You can also follow SKALE Twitter. Okay, so many great partnerships and dApps have been announced over the last few months. How does SKALE Labs prioritize and allocate support to its partners? Number one. Number two, we've recently seen some fantastic additions to the comms team. Will there soon be a need to grow the engineering team or other key teams at SKALE think? So I think one interesting thing to note is, what is SKALE? And what is SKALE Labs? So SKALE Labs is a core team. We're here supporting SKALE. We're not in charge of SKALE. We don't run a single server in the network. We don't make any decisions exclusively on anything that impacts economics of the network. Any code is going through a full decentralized process in terms of its analysis, testing, launch, and then there's a decentralized process that upgrades contracts. Okay, but core teams are important, and core teams, I'd say, are less authorities. They are more. We're almost like shepherds of the network, supporting the network. But what makes networks strong are growth across the community. That's why Ethereum's so powerful. There's so many people, including companies like SKALE, networks like SKALE, that help Ethereum. Now, SKALE will grow by helping. If we help make developers successful, they end up making the network more successful. They end up, with all the token holders and the validators owning the network. So that's our goal. So how does SKALE Labs prioritize and allocate support to its partners? Well, we as the core team, one, we try to help everyone we can. Two, we now have, for quite a while, have been so busy that we can't give the same amount of support to everybody. So there is a process. There's processes where anybody can reach out anytime. And there's type forms where you can give your information, answer questions. It goes to the team. And that we use the information around, like, what are you trying to build? tell us about your team. What sort of momentum do you have? What is your idea? Are you already live? Are you a big company, a small company? We look at this whole recipe, and then we try to figure out how to allocate time and support. And the other thing is the community is really growing. So we're seeing now too, developers across the community help other projects. And that's one of our goals too, is not to be a one-to-one model of core team to developers. It's more of a core team to ecosystem, and then ecosystem to developers. And projects that win really know how to do that, because one, you're embracing decentralization and the fact that more people that are involved and the more that are interacting with a code base, just the more successful it will be. And two, it's just more hands. You can get a lot more people helping. And so if you're a developer, you can go to Discord. The dev chat is where the action happens. And one of our goals is to start taking a lot of those conversations that the core team has in these private chats, which there are hundreds of these, start moving as many of those as possible to dev chat. Okay. Another question is, we've seen some fantastic additions to the comms team. Will there soon be a need to grow the engineering team? So the team's always growing. The core team has around 45 people, but the external team is growing just rapidly. I know there are over 250 people that are making serious contributions every day, and there's over 1,000 developers collectively in some capacity that throughout the course of the week or the month are having to work on Scale. And so it's awesome to see that growth. And again, I think there's two growth models. One is this traditional Silicon Valley centralized growth model where, it's a blitz scale, hire a shitload of people and, go forward as fast as you can. And then, market downturns, lay off a bunch of people and then pull back and then do the same thing when the market goes up. And that's not our style. We want to grow more like Ethereum, where our core team is really driving growth and authentic help and support and education. And then, it takes a little while longer to get that started, but we're starting all these small fires that then grow organically and naturally. And that is, there's some really great books and on open source growth. And we try to learn from, open source software, and open source efforts can grow tremendously faster than closed source efforts. They're also more compliant for what we do. They're more, I think, they're harder to get started, but once they get going, they really pick up. And you see that too on the community. The community, there's so many people every day that are pushing on Twitter, that are creating educational tools. There's so many ambassadors that are doing a great job. And so I commend everybody for all the work they're doing. And the core team, we're just honored to be able to play a role here and help. And we work really hard. We're working night and day, 7 days a week. Okay. All right, next question. Ions, can you tell me about the SKALE program, which focuses on blockchain gaming, play to earn gaming, and metaverse? Is this one of SKALE's biggest categories? So the answer is yes. When we look at SKALE, we think of SKALE as the new market for blockchain transactions. In the past, blockchains were purely evaluated on what was the TVL in the network, and there weren't, frankly, many users, and there weren't that many transactions. What's happening is that model is the foundation, I think, of what blockchain will be in the future. And our belief is that blockchain will support hundreds of millions, if not billions, of users a day, and not users that are sending, yes, users that are sending $10,000 or $100,000, but what about the users that want to send $2 or $3 or play a game that has 50 different transactions that don't even have money, but they're critical to the money they have, because these on-chain transactions actually dictate who wins or what they earn, or different game mechanics. Okay. And that's, so again, Web3, gaming, metaverse, huge category, because that's the tip of the spear for this area. And we see this every day. There's also Web3. And so Web3 social products out of NFT gating, another huge category. And so that's the focus of SKALE. DeFi will exist and TVL will exist across all these products. But first and foremost, we want to have lots of users and transactions, and it's a growth strategy. Okay. Great question. All right. A question from Al-Mutasem Al-Haj. what's the difference between SKALE network and other modular networks? And he mentions a few here. But what I would say is, so this whole thing about modular networks is really coming up. We have a blog post that's going out here early this week to talk about this. So when we think of a modular network, I say we have there's a few different ideas of what that means. For us, modular products are where you have larger groups and then clusters within those a larger set. And those clusters enable for individualized performance and also more, I would say, damage control. So if something happens in one group, the rest of the group isn't impacted. It's one of the values of modularity in science and technology. And modularity is a long-standing term. It's been around for a while. And it's, if you look at scale chains, they are modules within a larger group. They're clusters that all share security and resources. But if there's an issue on one scale chain, that scale chain is an isolated component. It's not connected to the rest of the group. It also is isolated and modular in the sense that it's not having to share performance resources. It's sharing security. Some people describe a modular blockchain as what we have in the term with all these app chains, right? Or that's another common word for modules, app chains. But they also modularize components of their technology stack, and they separate data availability from their consensus layer, as well as from execution. Okay, so they're essentially separating computation from finality. And so computation happens over here, and then they have a roll up that then has finality happen across a shared layer. So their bigger group is where the consensus happens. Their smaller group is where they are trying to essentially run rollups. And so SKALE believes in the consensus model and BLS threshold encryption. BLS is the added security technique so on top of the consensus, there's a added element of signatures that then pass over success or failure, in a message with information to other chains or back through the bigger group. Okay, SKALE is also connected to Ethereum, and so there's also a module within the Ethereum network called SKALE Manager that has a lot of functions. So SKALE is different in that as of today, there's not a roll-up. You don't see a ZK yet in SKALE, but it's not to say there won't be. I think we're really excited about what ZK can do, but it's not needed for most use cases. Roll-ups and that view of modularity adds cost and slowness to the equation. And if you want to talk about games and you want to talk about Web3 social products, they have to make decisions around user experience and security and what security is good enough. Because the most secure thing is like you could have a 10,000 pound safe vault and keep information in there. And every time someone needs something, somebody literally has to go in there, open the vault, and there's 20 security guards. That's really secure, but it's not effective or agile in an app environment. And so there's a spectrum. Now we at SKALE want to be on the high end of security and the high end of performance. And we want to find where those things meet. But if you go over in either direction, you lose too much security or you lose too much performance. And we think we found a good sweet spot. And I think that's where a lot of the discussion is in the marketplace. What is the sweet spot of the giveaways between performance and security? All right. Thank you. Great question. Another question from ZG Hedge. Okay. ZG, thank you. And he's asking, where is SKALE compared to layer 2 optimistic rollups? And I'm, I'll just, I see a company name here, but I'm just going to say there's a L2 optimistic rollup crowd. Again, the L2 optimistic rollup solutions have a different way of skinning the cat. They have essentially a side chain, but it's not a block. It's not a side chain. It's something that's running on, blockchain software that's not doing finality. It's not a full blockchain. And what it's doing is passing through information back to the Ethereum mainnet, and then the Ethereum mainnet finalizes everything. What that does is, I think it's a really great solution if you have lots of really expensive transactions, but if you don't care so much about speed, and if you don't care about cost. Now, if you want to do lots of transactions at low cost, it's not great because, even if you're paying 5 cents, 10 cents, 20 cents a transaction, how could you do? I mean, SKALE has 13.9 million, almost 14 million transactions today. Times that by 10 cents, and that's just in 6 months. I mean, that's a huge cost. And our goal is to have hundreds of millions of transactions, in a much shorter period of time. And so now SKALE still has a business model. It's not free. You have to pay for transactions, but the way you pay makes it orders of magnitude less expensive because you're paying for it in advance. And you're not making end users pay. So what I would, again, summary, strengths and weaknesses. Hey, if you want to, do $100,000 transactions, who cares if you have to pay 40 cents or, the other day, one of these L2s was $4. And the Ethereum mainnet was like $3 for the same transaction. So when they also have finite capacity. But point is, for what situation do you not care about a $4 transaction? There's a lot of things where you don't care, or you don't care about getting your money that quickly. And maybe you'll give up speed and you'll pay for that security. Whereas if you're a gamer, if you're somebody using an NFT Web3 product and you're not a crypto native person, you don't want to pay those fees every time you just use a product. Imagine if you're using Uber and each time you booked a ride, or you're using Twitter and each time you posted something, you literally have to pay money. You'd use the product a lot less, right? But guess what? You still pay. In Twitter, you're paying either through a premium subscription or through looking at advertising, and that pays the server fees on the back end. But they don't hurt the UX, and that's how SKALE works. Okay, great question. All right. Okay, next question. Okay, Shahid, my question is regarding marketing. I'm a core believer of SKALE, and nowadays so many L2 projects are coming in the market and competition is getting interested. How does SKALE win in this situation? So I think anytime you're looking at a map and you're trying to figure out like how do you compete and how do you win, the way when the SKALE community is looking at this, we're saying it's not one size fits all. We're not trying to be everything to everyone initially. I think there's room to grow. But it's the crossing the chasm bowling pin approach. And for us, we see a sweet spot for projects that want very low cost and lots of transactions. Okay, so that's gaming and Web3 products. Okay, these are products that are going to have lots of users, and it's still an early market, but there's a huge TAM. The TAM is the total addressable market. And so what we want to do at SKALE is create the absolute best product for that use case. And again, that might be a little different equation than somebody who's saying, hey, I want to let 1,000 users trade $1 million a day. You would make different trade-offs. Now, we still believe SKALE security is good enough for heavy DeFi. But we've really dialed in a lot of the work and effort as a community around the user experience. And so that's another reason why I've been saying a lot that SKALE is a user experience optimized blockchain. Okay. So how are we going to win? Collectively get the best product possible for that market and focus on that market. And then as the marketing messaging comes together, as the community outreach and business development and growth comes together, it's got to focus on that point. Over time, as more and more features roll out across SKALE can get stronger across other categories, but you don't want to try to be everything to everyone at once, or you're just going to be, you'll be diluting your impact. Okay. All right. Okay. Next question. And this is a question about zero gas fees. So Kanushka Thijan, okay. Will the feature of zero gas fees continue? And if not, will the zero gas fees feature be provided for a short period of time? I think what we're getting at here is it sustainable to have zero gas fees? And so when we look at SKALE is actually built to have sustainably have zero gas fees. Now, can Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud have zero fees for end users? Yes, it's because there's a business model, right? On SKALE, there's a business model. So developers have to buy SKALE. They have to fund a contract on the Ethereum mainnet in SKALE tokens that ends up paying in advance for the chain. All right. And that pays, that period they can pay for a month in advance, 6 months in advance, a year in advance. And there's an equation that looks at how loaded is the network. Let's say the network could have 100 chains or 1,000 chains and 50% of them are full. Well, then there's a price that's calculated based off of the load of the network, a USD value times the price of SKALE, and it tells the developer, oh, here's how much SKALE you have to pay into the contract. And they say, whoa, that's a good price right now. I'm going to lock this in. I'm going to pay, the network's pretty underloaded. I'm going to pay for like 2 years in advance. And they lock that in. And every month, just through a smart contract, it goes out and it pays stakers and validators. Okay. And so that's one element. And anytime you pay for something in advance, it usually costs less, especially servers. The other thing is a supply demand ratio question. So the price can be sustainably low because if, let's say there's 1,000 chains that are available and 750 of them are full and you get the 751st, that's going to cost way more than it would to get the 751st chain of instead of 1,000 of 5,000. So all of a sudden the network is at a much lower load percentage. Okay, so let's use more simple numbers. Let's say there's 10 chains and 5 of them were full. And the sixth one, you'd have 6, that'd be the network's at 60% load. Let's say there's an incentive, developers or validators can make more money and say, oh, if I set up another node, I'm going to get more money. And so they set up now more chains and all of a sudden more nodes, all of a sudden there's 20 chains. And so there's 6 of 20. Now, instead of being at 60% load, you're at 30% load of the network. And the chains cost less when the network's at less load. And so as long as there's an equation for the validators to keep making profit, they'll keep setting up nodes to make more money. It's kind of like drivers of Uber and Lyft. If there's too many drivers on the road, well, they're just going to quit driving because they can't make enough money. But if there's not enough drivers and there's more riders, well, there's surge pricing, and then they get paid more because the riders don't want to have to wait. So they can pay to get to the front of the line. Now, let's say that's happening, then drivers who might be sitting getting a cup of coffee might say, oh, wow, alert, there's a surge happening. Let me get out there and drive. And they get out there and drive, but then guess what? That ends up pushing the surge down because it increases the supply. SKALE, at the end of the day, is not just a technology product. It's an economics product, okay? There's been a lot of question about what's the price of SKALE chains. Well, one thing, there's been a strategic decision made, not by the core team, but by the developer community and the validators that the network is subsidizing costs. So there's a fee paid, much smaller fee paid to reserve each chain. If you look at other networks, they're subsidizing transaction fees by having huge inflation in a layer 1. So they inflate a lot of currency that helps the fees be really low so that validators still make money, but users don't have to pay. At some point that, you run out of inflation and you can't just inflate things forever. You need to have a real sustainable business model. That's one of the negative elements of monolithic layer 1s. They have trouble being competitively low priced with that model. Now SKALE, has this unique situation where we back to this subsidying by fees can be chain fees can be low at first, but eventually those chain fees have to be there because the inflation's on the limited drop schedule. So every year it's all in the smart contract. Anyone can read it if they want, but each year there's less inflation that comes out. And so eventually there has to be high chain fees to motivate validators to run servers and stakers to stake. But as the inflation goes down, the chain fees go up, right? It's like one's going down, the other one's going up, and they have to meet at this point where always there's this line that developers or stakers and validators need to be able to run. It needs to be worth their time to stake or run nodes. And so that's how the equation works. Now there will be on-chain voting that's coming live, and again, we're doing what we can to help support this, but this is decentralized. We can't just control it and do everything. But there are a lot of people working on what this will look like. And one of the first votes will be ratifying the on-chain price model. Now, and the good news about that is as soon as all these fees start ramping up and the inflation is going down, the inflation will still be the same for this year. And it's just more and more fees. And then it's just more profitable for people to stake tokens. Okay. Now, it's in conflict to growth, right? Because developers are saying, hey, well, if I could pick SKALE or I could pick something else, but this one's going to cost me all these fees up front. Well, that's why like there's this bootstrapping thing that's happening where where intentionally the prices are lower and then they're going to start getting higher. But at the end of the day, even at, let's say a chain costs 250,000 USD value of scale, and you're paying scale and you're paying for that much, it is dramatically less expensive than the fees that go in, especially using like a relay product like Biconomy or something to subsidize gas fees. That's an order of magnitude more expensive than the scale economic model, because scale's economics: 1, advanced payment; 2, elastic pricing. Okay. And we're going to keep talking about that. I feel like we need to just keep pushing out educational pieces, because people say, oh, zero gas fees. It doesn't make sense unless the whole picture comes together. All right. Actually, this is a really good lead in to the next question from Michael. What is the SKALE community chain and how is it relevant to the community? Well, number one, let's say it costs 250-ish thousand for a, and that's, let's say at like a 60% price point, whatever, these economics need to be finalized. But if it costs X amount of, of scale tokens, and that's a lot. Well, what if you're a small project and you don't have that type of money, and you don't need, that amount of transactions. You don't need 100 transactions per second. You only need one every 2 minutes or something, which still is not a bad amount of transactions. You need one every 10 seconds. Well, if that's the case, you don't want to rent your own chain and pay for it all by yourself. It's almost like a community chain is almost like having roommates. Okay. You have this big apartment, but the more of you that are there and each sharing the room, the less it costs per, if you bring on a fourth roommate, well, it costs less for everybody. And so really it's a shared model, a shared rent model, where lots of projects can share the rent of the chain. Okay. And that chain too is getting a grant from the foundation to help the community chain get up and running. And eventually that community group will come up with a model, and so will Europa, so will Calypso, and how they extract through their payment layer to come up with, then go buy scale tokens to then fund the chain cost. Okay. But community chains are shared resources. And it's all about lowering the cost per entity, which is a great thing as long as you're not, getting too many projects on one chain that it's overloading the chain and the chain's getting bloated and slow. Okay. All right. We only have 2 questions left. Kasubi, how is SKALE eco-friendly? What makes SKALE so eco-friendly? Well, SKALE is very eco-friendly. One, it's proof of stake. Proof of stake is dramatically more cost-effective in terms of energy usage and, energy green and, global environmentally friendly right out of the gates because of the way the consensus works. And there's a lot of, I won't get into the details, please look it up. But the other piece is SKALE uses containerization. So it gets a lot of efficiency out of each node. A lot of nodes just get thrown on a blockchain and they kind of are just running in this redundant fashion, the exact same thing the other nodes are. In SKALE, only a certain amount of nodes are working per chain, and only a certain percentage of the node is working on that chain. And so what's happening is there's a lot of resource optimization. And so when the network is effectively allocating resources to applications, there's not a more eco-friendly way to do that because of the fact that compute power is not wasted. Okay. So it's proof of stake, and this modular containerization strategy enables for really efficient use of resources. All right. Well, hey, we're running through this. I'm excited for the next AMA because I'm going to have Stan and Chadwick here, and it's a lot to do it all on your own. I'm just boom, boom, boom. So I'm drinking my coffee. All right. All right. Jonas, a question from Jonas. There was a conversation in Ruby's Telegram that how can you interact with a smart contract if the front end is down? This drives me to a question. If Ruby's website runs totally on SKALE network, how could this affect the website's performance compared to its current environment? And I think what Jonas is getting at here is SKALE file storage and how can a decentralized front end function and operate. Okay, so this is a great question. So I think I want to back up so people understand what file storage is, SKALE file storage. Okay, so you have the back end of a blockchain kind of sits behind the scenes. That has to connect to an interface, right? If you go to Uniswap, their front end, to my knowledge, maybe they've changed this since I last looked, but it might be running on IPFS now. But I know for a while it wasn't, and that was run by the team. The team ran servers that let people interact with the backend. Now, the problem is what if that team or company quits paying their Amazon bill that they use to host the website? Because you have to run the front end still has to be on a server, has to be on a computer somewhere, right? And connected to the internet so people can access that then lets them access the back end. But what if somebody doesn't pay the bill on the front end? Well, how do you get back there? Well, maybe there's some root level to like make things trigger at the smart contract level. The other option is you make that front end not live on Amazon. The front end lives in a decentralized environment. Scale can let a website run fully decentralized. You can have Scale file storage, and you can have the front end running in the blockchain. And I talked about containers earlier. So there's a container in each Scale chain that literally it's called Scale file storage. What you can do is you can store NFT images there. You can store images and front end for a website. You can have video there. And what it does is it gives you a lot of the power that you get through IPFS or different decentralized file storage products. But this one's all on chain. Now, if you want to store like huge amounts of data, IPFS would be better. But if you're looking at front end action, Scale file storage is awesome. So I think, Jonas, what you're getting at is if Ruby were running its front on a Scale file storage, how would that affect, it has good decentralization, but does it impact performance? Well, hey, each time you're clicking something, there could be a little bit of latency compared to a centralized environment, but not dramatic. I mean, and I think we're seeing good performance happen. And I think there's a lot of stuff that can still be done at the browser level to ensure there's speed and performance. But in general, if things are running on the blockchain, they may be slightly slower, but not dramatically so. But I think with some optimized coding, you could be using the browser to do a lot of work and not relying entirely on the back end of the file storage database. Okay, so great question. All right, everybody. I hope you've had fun. I've got my Charmander outfit on for the Pokemon fans out there. Hopefully you're ready to have fun on Halloween. Have a good time. It's been a pleasure for me. Last thing to say, reminder, keep your eyes open. We're so pumped for this community roadmap to come out. There's going to be, again, I'm spending a lot of time, so is the rest of the team and other community members, talking to more community members in the developer community to get consensus, because this is a decentralized roadmap that will be launched, not a core team focused roadmap. But I'm hearing some cool stuff. I think there's going to be some cool pieces in there. And again, as soon as it's consolidated, you'll see it all public, right? This is a public open project. Today, you can see everything down to the most finite detail on GitHub, but we want to bubble up that and future things from a long term for every single person, regardless of your technical acumen. All right. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to, I'm going today to, if you're in San Francisco, I'll be talking on a panel at East San Francisco, or sorry, NFT San Francisco. I'll be talking at East San Francisco this next Friday, and we'll be supporting the hackathon. I will be in Portugal next Tuesday on a panel at a staking summit, and I will be in London on Wednesday speaking on a panel, a ZK panel actually, at Token 2049 in London. So it's gonna be a busy week for me. I'm pumped. Let's keep carrying the Scale flag, and thanks everybody for your support. All right, have a great day. Bye. Happy Halloween.